Welcome to The Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today. Our goal for this session is simple, but man is it powerful. We're going to take this massive mountain of dense financial data, stuff like institutional guidelines and tricky IRS tax codes, and we're going to translate all of it into a clear, actionable roadmap for your future.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today. We're covering 6 key areas. First, what retirement planning actually is. Second, when to start. Third, building your retirement fund. Fourth, navigating those tricky liabilities. Fifth, smart withdrawal strategies. And finally, some crucial final thoughts before we wrap up.
So, Section 1. What exactly is retirement planning?
If you're like most people, you probably think planning is just about stashing a percentage of your paycheck into an account and, hoping for the best. But true planning, it goes way beyond just hoarding cash. Picture 2 empty chairs sitting on a peaceful dock overlooking the water. Ultimately, retirement planning is not about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about securing financial security and peace of mind. It's about ensuring that a future version of yourself can actually sit in one of those chairs, totally relaxed, listening to the water without a single worry about outliving your assets or stressing over the next bill.
All right, moving into Section 2. When should we start planning for retirement?
Well, the mathematical answer to when you should start is basically always as early as possible. But behaviorally, why is it so incredibly difficult to plan for a version of yourself you haven't even met yet? You see, behavioral finance reveals that our individual biases are constantly clouding our rational investment decisions. We suffer from something called myopia, a short-term focus based heavily on our most recent experiences. Even though we literally know we have a decades-long horizon, this future self-disconnect makes it so hard to sacrifice today's spending for tomorrow's security. Honestly, it's just really hard to care about someone who feels like a total stranger.
But get this, there is a fascinating solution to that disconnect. According to 401k pioneer Shlomo Benardzi and research published in the AMA Journal of Marketing, using age progression software to literally show people a visual rendering of their older, future selves completely changed their behavior. No joke, it doubled the amount of money study participants chose to allocate to their retirement savings. Visually connecting with our older selves forces us to get real about our savings goals. It turns this kind of abstract concept into a living, breathing human being that we genuinely want to protect.
Section 3. Building your retirement fund.
Now that we're actually thinking about our future selves, let's talk about the accumulation phase. We've got some brand new tools and limits available for wealth building based on the latest IRS data for 2026. Let me hit you with a punchy data drop. $24,500. The IRS just announced that the annual contribution limit for employees participating in 401k, 403b, and most 457 plans has bumped up to $24,500 for the 2026 tax year. That is a solid jump. It gives you a lot more room to aggressively let compound interest work its absolute magic.
Right on the heels of that, $7,500. The IRS also increased the limit on annual contributions to individual retirement arrangements, or IRAs, taking it from $7,000 up to $7,500 for 2026.
But here is the real game changer, $11,250. Under the Secure 2.0 Act, there is a massive, highly time-sensitive super catch-up limit exclusively available to workers aged 60, 61, 62, and 63. If you happen to be in that specific 4-year window, you can shelter an extra $11,250 annually in your 401k. But listen, you've got to be careful here. The window slams shut the very year you turn 64. Plus, if your W-2 wages topped $150,000, every single catch-up dollar must go into a Roth 401k, otherwise you forfeit the contribution entirely.
Let's ground all this in a real-world example just to see how large employers structure these retirement savings vehicles for their staff. We're going to take a look at the institutional framework used by the University of Pennsylvania.
Walk through this specific plan structure with me. Penn uses a multi-tiered approach. First, there's a basic plan, which features age-based automatic contributions directly from the employer. No opt-in required at all. Then, there's a matching plan, where they match employee contributions dollar for dollar up to 5%. On top of that, employees can tap into an SRA, which is a purely voluntary supplemental retirement annuity. And finally, they have the WRAP, a traditional pension, providing payments based on years of service. This brilliantly illustrates how combining automatic safety nets, employer matches, and voluntary structures creates a ridiculously resilient retirement foundation.
Section 4. Navigating retirement liabilities.
So building wealth is really only half the battle. We have to actively protect the wealth we've just built from some very real threats. On one side of the equation, we have the vulnerability of a rigid fixed income, kind of like a standard pension that just doesn't keep up with cost of living adjustments. On the other side, we have a flexible portfolio with equity exposure. When battling sustained economic inflation, retirees often get spooked and shift way too heavily into bonds and cash for safety, but historically, stocks outpace inflation over long periods. Maintaining meaningful equity exposure is absolutely vital so you don't inadvertently create an inflation risk that completely destroys your purchasing power. If you just stockpile cash, you are actually losing ground every single year.
You've really got to watch out for the silent killers of retirement. First up, sustained inflation. Just to put this into perspective, if we see sustained 3% inflation, a retiree with a fixed $50,000 pension is going to see that income drop to about $37,000 in actual purchasing power in just 10 years. That's a massive hit. Second, healthcare costs, which consistently outpace general inflation. And finally, long-term care. Annual nursing home costs that are sitting around $100,000 today are projected to surpass $150,000 within a decade. You absolutely must plan for larger savings goals to combat these massive liabilities.
All right, Section 5, Smart Withdrawal Strategies. You've accumulated the funds, you've planned for the liabilities, so now, how do you efficiently distribute your money without losing a huge chunk of it to taxes? Well, let's see how this builds. The conventional withdrawal sequence goes like this. Step 1, tap your taxable accounts first, like your standard brokerage accounts. Step 2, move to your tax-deferred accounts next, like traditional IRAs and 401ks. And Step 3, save your tax-free accounts, like your Roth and HSA accounts, for dead last. Why? Because this sequence allows your tax-advantaged money to continue growing for as long as possible, really stretching the life of your nest egg.
However, you have to stay super vigilant because of two critical definitions. RMDs are required minimum distributions. Once you hit a certain age, which is currently 73, the IRS actually forces you to take taxable distributions from your tax-deferred accounts. If those forced withdrawals bump your income up too high, you trigger IMA. That's the Income-Related Monthly Adjustment Amount, which basically slaps you with higher Medicare premiums. Doing strategic Roth conversions in your early lower-income retirement years can significantly reduce those tax-deferred balances, completely preventing these massive tax spikes later on. Now, beyond which account to pull from, there's the big question of how much to pull. The classic 4% rule has long been the gold standard. It's a very rigid, set-it-and-forget-it mindset based entirely on historical market data using only the S&P 500 and government bonds. But a modern dynamic approach that adjusts your spending depending on how the market actually performs that specific year, utilizing highly diversified asset classes, adjusting your withdrawal rate to current market conditions gives you a far, far better defense against outliving your portfolio during volatile times.
And that brings us to Section 6, Final Thoughts, plus a quick reminder to like, share, and subscribe.
I want to leave you with this final, provocative question to chew on. When you think about risk, are you prepared to ensure you won't outlive your money? When retirees are surveyed, outliving their money is almost always their number one fear. But by truly understanding the mechanics we've discussed today, maximizing those new IRS limits, shielding yourself against inflation, and executing a smart, tax-efficient withdrawal strategy, you can absolutely conquer that fear. Overcoming that risk is the ultimate reward, and it grants you the peace of mind to actually enjoy the retirement you've worked so hard for.
If you found this structured roadmap to retirement helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. Doing that tells us that you value clear, focused learning, and it genuinely helps us keep creating content that empowers you with actionable knowledge. Thank you so much for spending your time with me on this explainer, and I will catch you in the next one.